Welcome to Bringing Jesus Back into Focus. I'm Christopher John Joseph. We'll be reading from the Gospels of Jesus Unplugged, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John and Thomas, which I have published just this March 2026. Having been brought up in the Jewish Christian Catholic Church, I left when I was 16, but I took Jesus and his beautiful words with me. I was not the least bit interested in being told there's only one God in the Bible, because clearly the Jews worship a filthy war god called Yahweh 1 and a god of love called Yahweh 2. The Romans had Mars, a war god, Ares for the Greeks, Sekhmet for the Egyptians, and the Jews had their war god called Yahweh. They all had a temple to their war god, and they were brutal, murdering, genocidal, thieving war gods, all satanic. Jesus even said, you are worshipping Satan, you are children of Satan, and he was a murderer and a liar from the start, and you do the lusts and desires of Satan. He was saying you're worshipping a war god, stop doing it to the Jews. Now they also had a god of love, just as the Romans had Pax, and the Greeks had Irene, and the Egyptians had another calming god as well. But the Jews were not honest. They didn't call their loving god, which is the exact opposite type of god to a brutal war god. They should have called their loving god and built another temple for that god, which was the god you find in Leviticus. You find the war god in Joshua, where they go and slaughter everyone at Jericho and steal the land and all the riches, because Yahweh tells them to do it. That's the war god. But then in Leviticus, another god, another Yahweh, says, if a foreigner from Jericho is amongst you, treat them as if they're Jewish, and love them like a Jew. Love them as yourself. That's a different God. Go down and kill everyone at Jericho and steal their land and murder and kill everyone, man, woman and child. I'm Yahweh. Great, thanks Yahweh. Another Yahweh says, if a foreigner is amongst you, someone from Jericho for example, treat them as if they're a Jew and love them as you do Jews. You see, that's another God. So that's a dualistic religion. So I got out of the church anyway, because I went across to study Buddha's teachings, because I knew Jesus was a pacifist and they weren't even teaching that. And the book of Revelations is the most slanderous book ever written about Jesus, and I advise any Jewish Christian to rip it out and burn it. It is just pure filth, slander, and stinks to high hell. That's Satan coming on the clouds. That's a war god, and that is a brutal, violent, murdering, just evil thing, and that is clearly not Jesus. So Jewish Christians teach these lies to children in their churches, their Jewish Christian churches. I've never been a Jewish Christian. I've never been poisoned by the Jewish religion. I have no interest whatsoever in the book of Revelation, other than if I'm out of paper here to light the fire, I'll use it to light the fire. That's about the only use you can have with that thing. And I cut the Bible in two and put the Jewish religion out of the way, because there are two gods in that religion. It's a dualistic religion, not monotheistic. Jesus is monotheistic. He brings you only to a God of love. So I had to redo the Gospels, because I was shocked by what I heard these last 5 years when I investigated what was going on. Because when I left the Jewish Christian Catholic Church, I studied a lot of different religions and stuff. I was very interested in spiritual stuff when I was in my late teens and early 20s. And Buddha and Jesus were my two favourites, of course. Jesus was my birth teacher he leads me to heaven. And Buddha also leads you to nirvana, another word for heaven. They both said you've got to clean your mind out of all the dirty things in your mind, adventitious negativities. They both taught that, and they said then that will reveal your true identity. And Jesus said your whole body will be filled with light, because your eye will become single. You'll become at one with love. Heaven's only love. The loving creator of Jesus is only love. Jesus was only love. You become only love, and you'll follow him to where he's gone. He's not coming back on the clouds. That's a Jewish overlay lie that the Jewish Christians teach. Don't believe them. They're lying to you. So he's not coming back. He said, follow me to where I'm going, and I'll explain to you how to get there. Become like me, and you will be there. That's his teaching. Buddha said, become enlightened, and you'll be in nirvana where I'm going. That's their teachings. Become like me. And in so doing, we follow his words, because he explains to me how to become like him. Without his words, I wouldn't know how to become like him. And 17 times in the Gospels, I've actually got a dedicated chapter at the beginning of the book called His Words Save Us. There are 17 accounts where one way or another he says, he who listens to my words and understands them will not taste death, will pass through death to life. He says it 17 times, my words will save you. Not his blood. that's about having two bodies. And Jesus did teach we have two bodies. One's a spiritual body that leaves the body of flesh at death. He said that at the time of death, not at an apocalypse. That's Jewish rubbish overlay. That's the book of Daniel. It's a Zoroastrian belief anyway. The Jews adopted it. It's not even a Jewish belief. So they adopted it. But Jesus had nothing to do with that. He's about becoming at one with love to go to this more beautiful dimension. You've got to remember the spiritual heavenly world and the heavenly world itself and the spiritual universe is a different dimension. You have a spiritual body with you now. You can't see it because if you try to see it with your eyeballs of flesh and this mushy brain, this brain and these eyeballs are made out of all the material stuff. And the material biological organism only sees material things, the material universe, the material world. You can't see the spiritual world except through your spiritual eye, or your spiritual body, or your spiritual mind. Now the spiritual mind, once that awakens inside you, that's when you realize that's who you really are. A mind completely undisturbed by any evil in you. You become free of evil. That's the awakening, that's the enlightenment of who you really are. Then you're in your spiritual body then, even though you still can't see it, but you're going to live in it. And that beautiful mind you have here on earth, you've overcome temptation, you've overcome to love and hate and kill and save, you've overcome all the temptations that Jesus and Buddha both had to overcome. And then you become like them, a pacifist child, a non-violence on earth, and then you let the love flow out of your physical body to everyone you meet. You're not greedy, you don't hold on to material things, you're not attached to the material world at all anymore. You just live a normal life, simple life, getting ready to go to this more beautiful world in your spiritual body that will leave at death, providing it is filled with the loving spiritual life force from above. Flesh can only give birth to flesh, Jesus said. Spirit can only give birth to spirit. You must be born again from above. Your spiritual body comes alive not by eating pumpkins or pizzas or potatoes. Your spiritual body comes alive through the loving spiritual life force of heaven, which is already in your spiritual body, but it needs to be activated and be filled. And then Jesus says you'll open up a wellspring within you that comes from heaven, and you will have this loving life force in you your whole time that you remain on earth, and then you will go to heaven in your spiritual body that is alive and full of love. They're his teachings, they're Buddhist teachings. Do not listen to the Jewish Christians who teach he's coming back on the clouds, or your body's going to raise up at some apocalyptic time or something that Jesus is going to cause. That's all rubbish and lies and slander. And it's poison, and it's Jewish poison. The book of Revelation is the book of Daniel. It belongs in the Old Testament. Cut the Bible in two, get rid of the Jewish religion out of Christian churches, rip out the book of Revelation and burn it. Then you'll understand, hopefully, if you've got a good gospel translation, you'll understand what he's talking about. It's still the same challenge. You've still got to be spiritual. You've got to believe in heaven, life after death. And here you've got to turn the other cheek. Love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. You've still got to follow and become like him. And that's the challenge. That's the hard part. But it's all in his words, his instructions. And he said, follow me. Where I'm going, there's plenty of places, plenty of abodes to live. And I'll prepare a place for you to meet you there when you come. Follow me to where I've gone. He never said he's coming back. Disciples will receive spirit of truth. John 14. So we're reading John, so we're moving along. We'll get into it. John 14, 15, 23. Jesus said, if you love me, you will keep my teachings and spiritual way of love and non-violence. And I will ask our loving spiritual creator to give you another support that it may abide with you forever. The spirit of truth, the loving spiritual life force of our loving creator that the material worldly ones cannot receive. For they neither see it nor know what it is. But you know of it, for it is within you, and empowers your spiritual bodies and soul minds of love. I will not send you forth as orphans. I will be with you in spirit. You see, he's saying it's within you. But you know of it, for it is within you. Where is heaven, they asked him. Heaven's within you. He said, you've got a spiritual body that's heavenly. The connection to heaven, the nexus is within you. It's the treasure hidden in the field of the flesh. It's the one great pearl. It's the one good and great fish in the Thomas Gospel, the correct net saying. It's in you. The connection to heaven's in you. Soon the world will see me no more, but you will see me again. Because I live in the spirit, you will also come alive to your spirit. On that day you will come to understand that I am in our loving Creator's spiritual life force, and you will be as me, and I as you. On that day you will come to understand that I am in our loving Creator's spiritual life force, which is empowering his spiritual body that came fully alive. His spiritual mind became fully opened. He had a clear mind experience. He was a spiritually born again child. And you will be as me and I as you. If you just do what I say, you'll become like me. And anyone who loves me will be loved by a loving Creator. And I will love them and make myself known to them as a spiritual child of our loving Creator. So once you become spiritual, you'll realize what Jesus has been saying all along. He's also a spiritual child in the flesh. Judas asked, "Teacher, how is it that you will make yourself known to us and not the world?" Jesus said, "Those who love me in my spiritual way follow my words, and our loving Creator will love them, and she will come to them and make a dwelling place in heaven with them. Those who do not love me do not follow my words, and my words come from our loving spiritual Creator." Author. Jesus tells the disciples to follow his teachings and spiritual way, and they will receive the Spirit of truth, the loving spiritual life force of our loving Creator, to support and empower their spiritual lives. Materially minded children cannot easily receive it. He predicts he will die and be out of sight for a while, but will appear to them again in his spiritual body. And once they awaken spiritually, they will have the same loving spiritual life force that is in his spiritual body, and they will all be alike. Then our loving spiritual Creator can welcome them also into their abode in the heavenly spiritual world to be with her for all eternity. The Jewish Christians often teach this lie that no one can be like Jesus. Here's Jesus saying, "I'm like you and you'll be like me." They lie. They distort what he's saying. They shouldn't do that. They're ignoring his words to start with. "Peace I give to you." They shouldn't do that. John 14:25-31. Jesus said, "I tell you these things while I am still with you. But the loving spiritual life force whom our loving Creator will send into you will continue to teach you and help you recall the things I've said. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Not in the same way this material world gives do I give it to you, but in spirit. Let your soul not be troubled or afraid. You have heard me tell you that I am going away and coming back to you in spirit. If you loved me, you would be happy for me, because I said I am going to be with our loving Creator in the heavenly spiritual world. I'm going off on a holiday. You should be really happy for me, but I've got to go through being murdered first. And I tell you this now before it happens, so you may believe when it happens. I have little time to talk with you, for the ruler of this material world is coming, and nothing of me is in him. These are satanic beasts of the flesh, false identity children. They're not there in their spiritual body, they're false. But our loving spiritual Creator has given me a spiritual task to fulfill, and I wish to show the world that I love our spiritual Creator. So rise up and let us leave here. Author. Jesus tells them again he is leaving them, but will appear to them again in spirit, and they should not be afraid of what will happen to him or what they will see. He blesses them with his spiritual peace and reminds them the loving spiritual life force of our loving Creator will teach and guide them after he has gone. Satanic children are about to seize him so he can fulfill his spiritual task, which is to publicly display his body of flesh being murdered and dying, and then later he'll appear to the disciples in his perfect spiritual body. That's the spiritual task he had to fulfill. Incredibly brave, incredibly courageous. I'm glad he did it for us, to show us we've got a spiritual body. If we just bring it alive and lead a life of love and non-violence, we'll be seeing him later on in the other dimension, the spiritual dimension of love. Jesus is the vine. John 15:1-8. Jesus said, "I am the true spiritual vine, and our loving Creator is the farmer who planted the vine. And every branch connected to me that does not bear any spiritual fruit is taken away. And every branch that does bear spiritual fruit is cleansed, so that it may bear more fruit. You are already spiritually cleaned through receiving the spiritual teachings I have spoken to you and by following them." That's a very important point. I've met these Jewish Christians, some who have condemned me, because they've asked me, do I believe the blood of Jesus cleanses me of sin? I say no, Jesus did not say that. He actually said, you are already spiritually clean through receiving the spiritual teachings and words I have spoken to you and by following them. Jesus didn't say that, I tell them. Jesus said 17 times his words save you. You're even clean. He even says in John, you're clean. You're already clean because of the words I've given you. It says so in the Gospel of John. So don't believe the Jewish Christians when they tell you his blood cleans you of sin. It does nothing to do with sin. It won't help you stop sinning. That's the sacrificial lamb Jewish overlay they talk about. They're Jewish Christians, you see. I'm not a Jewish Christian, so I don't have any of that poison in me, any of that misunderstanding or Jewish lens stuff. Remain with me and live out of the Spirit, and I will remain with you. As the branch of the vine cannot bear fruit by itself unless connected to the vine, neither can you bear spiritual fruits unless you are connected with me through my spiritual teachings and way. I am the vine, and you are the branches. He who lives with my spiritual teachings within him is with me and will bear much spiritual fruit. It's all about my teachings, my spiritual way. Become like me, become like me. Wake up, wake up. Bring those dead to the Spirit back to life, he said to the disciples. He who does not know the way of my spiritual teachings can do nothing spiritual. If anyone does not live out of the spiritual water and spiritual life force found within my spiritual teachings, their spirit will dry up and wither away. If you live in spirit with me and my teachings live in you, ask what you desire and it will be done for you. In this way, a loving spiritual creator is glorified, and by bearing much spiritual fruit, you will all be my disciples. Thomas, saying 40, Jesus said, a grapevine has been planted outside of the loving creator's spiritual life force. And because it has no spiritual vitality, it will wither and have to be removed. A beautiful saying that Thomas saying. If your body's not being filled with the loving spiritual life force from heaven, it has no spiritual vitality and it's withering. And the problem is we've got these satanic warmongers in the world at the moment whose spiritual bodies are just almost withered away to nothing. They're just satanic murderers now, dark shadow figures. So Jesus is warning everyone all the time, keep your spirit alive and full of light and love. Author, Jesus is a spiritual teacher and understands who our loving spiritual creator is in the heavenly spiritual world and how to reach heaven from earth. He teaches this to other children, and some are awakened to become spiritual children just like him and perform spiritual works by following his teachings and way. This keeps their spirits alive and clean and prepares them to enter the heavenly spiritual world after their death experience. Others are not interested in his spiritual teachings and way, so it is unlikely they will awaken spiritually to perform spiritual works to be ready to enter the heavenly spiritual world. By performing spiritual works, it's an automatic thing. Once you're spiritually awakened, you'll just love and care for people. The actions and things you do, they are the works of your spiritual mind of love. So loving your family, loving your neighbours, sick friends, the person who falls over in the street, the homeless on the street. Your actions express your spiritual body and soul mind of love through the body of temporary flesh. So you manifest in the material world, you're manifesting a love that's from another dimension, another universe, another world. It's called the heavenly world or the nirvana world. It's a different dimension. And you've got a spiritual body that's perfect like an angel's. Doesn't die. And there's no toilets here. You don't need to eat food like you do here. That's all dirt. We eat dirt, we drink the ocean, we breathe in the gas. Our bodies are a living biological organism that falls apart when it dies and disintegrates into its elements. Your spiritual body is different, Jesus said. It's empowered by a loving spiritual life force from above, from heaven. That's why you've got to be born again into it, he said. You've got to become at one with it. That has to be your primary identity. Then you just express it through the material body while you're here. So you never join an army, navy or air force. You never do that if you're a Christian, never. Or a Buddhist, you'd never do that. We can't do that. We can't kill other children, no matter who they are. We're children of heaven. There is none of violence in heaven. There's only love. Jesus said, the loving spiritual creator, her love rises like the sun on the good and on the evil. Her love is like the rain that falls on the just and the unjust. She's kind to the ungrateful and the evil. Unless your love is perfect as this, you're not entering heaven. Only loving children enter heaven, but only love. Not love, hate, save, kill. You're divided within yourself. You're full of darkness. The Jewish religion follows a two-headed God called Yahweh with two heads, a brutal, violent, killing, murdering war god and a God of love. It's a divided religion within itself. It's in darkness. It's perverted. Jesus tried to take them out of it into the singularity of love. They murdered him and stayed in it, but some followed him out. And then you've got the Christian religion, the pacifist, loving religion, until the 4th century under Constantine, when the corrupt church leaders converted all the Christians back into being Jewish and Christian, and told them to worship Yahweh again, the two-headed God. And for 1700 years, I don't know of any Christian church who's gone back to the original teaching. That's why I'm doing this work, to encourage Jewish Christian church to cut ties with the Jewish religion, certainly declare Yahweh is not the God of Jesus, there is only one loving spiritual creator, and then teach Jesus' teachings and rip out the book of Revelation and burn it. Because that's the book of Daniel, it belongs in the Jewish religion, not the Christian religion. So it's a beautiful thing. He prepares us to enter heaven. But people who don't follow any spiritual thinking or spiritual way of love and non-violence, well, the chances are they, might get tangled up in material world or worship money or something. It doesn't mean they won't enter heaven, but it just means they're going to have to naturally be spiritual. Love, care, be decent, honest, caring, sharing, generous, compassion, forgive, non-violence, equanimity, treat everyone the same. If they're naturally like that, even without hearing anything about Jesus or Buddha, but they've got a nature that is like Jesus and like Buddha's, just naturally from their parents, just their own innate nature, and they've stayed that way all their life, then they'll enter heaven. Even if they don't believe in life after death, they'll enter heaven, because you'll know them by their fruits. Love is love. Abide in my love, John 15:9-17. Jesus said, as the loving spiritual creator has loved me, so have I loved you. Live in my spiritual way of love, and with the love of our loving spiritual creator in you. If you keep my teachings and spiritual way, you will live out of my spiritual way of love, just as I have kept our loving creator's spiritual way and live out of her love. These things I have told you, so my joy may remain in you, and your love may be fulfilled in spirit. This is my instruction, that you love one another as I have loved you. No one has greater love than this, than to lay down his life of flesh, to establish and put into place his spiritual life for the sake of his friends. What he's saying there is, I'm going to let him murder my body of flesh because I know I've got a spiritual body that doesn't die, and so I'm going to let them kill my body of flesh so that I can establish my spiritual body alone, apart from the body of flesh. So you had to have his body of flesh killed or just to die naturally for his spiritual body to leave it, because we can't leave our body of flesh until it dies. So that's why he voluntarily allowed them to murder his body of flesh that has to die anyway, so that he could establish his spiritual body by itself, alone, separate from the flesh. And that's what he appeared to the disciples in, his perfect spiritual body, like an angel's, with no wounds. And he didn't eat fish and honey. They put that in, they had to. I explain it in my other book, The Teachings of Jesus. But anyway, you are my friends if you follow my teachings and spiritual way. No longer do I call you servants, for a servant does not know what his master is doing. For I have called you friends, for all things our loving spiritual creator has told me, I've made known to you. So he's saying, look, you're just like, you know as much as I do now. He's not the only special child of God, and no one else can ever be like him. I've heard these Jewish Christians teach that to children. They're destroying what he's saying. That's like putting a psychological block in all their minds. You'll never be like Jesus, No one can be like Jesus. You're not going to be like Jesus. Yes, you're going to be in sin all the time, or you'll probably sin. He never did. No, he overcame sin and became enlightened, and he said, you can do it too. It's terrible what they put these psychological blocks in children. You can become like Jesus. You can become like Buddha. You can. They teach you how to do it. They want you to do it. Oh, dear me. You did not choose me, but rather I chose you and appointed you, that you should go and bear spiritual fruit, and that fruit that is yours will continue to exist and never perish. And whatever you ask our loving spiritual Creator in my name, she will give you. And I say again that you must love one another. Author. Jesus loves in the exact same way our spiritual Creator loves. She is only love and can never hurt anyone, just like Jesus. He tells us all to move into this same spiritual love and live out of it every day of our lives for each other, to become her spiritual children on earth and bring forth spiritual works of love for other children. Jesus regards everyone who follows his teachings and spiritual way as being equal to himself. And he is willing to establish his spiritual body apart from his temporary body of flesh by being murdered to show us all that we have two different bodies in one. And only our spiritual body lives on, which we must keep clean and alive with the loving spiritual life force of heaven. And that is what the crucifixion was all about. He let them kill one of his bodies of flesh, which was going to die anyway, and he had a living, beautiful spiritual body of love only, a mind of love. He was fully awakened, and he appeared to the disciples on Friday night, most likely, in his spiritual body. And that's when they understood everything he was teaching. I hope you can see it too, because I've gotten rid of a lot of the poison and the lies, so you can see it more clearly in his words. World hates you and me. John 15:18-27 and 16:1-4. Jesus said, if the worldly ones hate you, know they hated me before they hated you. If you were of the material world, the worldly ones would love you. But you are not of this world, as I chose you out of this world to be in the spiritual world. Therefore the worldly ones hate you. Remember I told you, a servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will also persecute you. But if they followed my teachings, they would follow yours also. All these things they will do to you, because you are my followers, and because they do not know the loving spiritual Creator who sent me to you. If I had not come and spoken the spiritual truth to them, they would have no sin, but now they have no excuse for their sin. He who hates me hates our loving Creator also. If I had not performed the spiritual works among them, which no one else could do, they would have no sin. But now they have seen these spiritual works and hate both me and our loving Creator, who empowers me to perform them. But when you receive the loving spiritual life force, the Spirit of Truth, who proceeds from the loving spiritual Creator that I shall give to you, her life force will testify about me. And you also will bear witness, because you have been with me from the beginning, and now you know me. I have told you these things to forewarn you, so that you remain strong in the spiritual way I have taught you. They will expel you from the synagogues, and indeed the time is coming that whoever kills you will think they are doing a service to their God. All these things they will do to you, for they have not known me or our loving Creator. I have told you about these things in advance, so you will be prepared and remember me warning you about them. I did not need to tell you these things while I was still with you. He's about to leave and go to heaven in his spiritual body. Author. Jesus is warning the disciples that they will face persecution for leaving the Jewish two-headed God Yahweh and following him and his spiritual way of love to become awakened spiritual children of the one loving spiritual Creator. The Jews were ignorant of the one loving spiritual Creator, but had a version of her in their Godhead Yahweh too, who taught to love your neighbour as yourself, while their other Godhead Yahweh one, the Godhead of war, taught to kill your neighbour and steal their land. Two different gods. By rejecting the true spiritual way of life that Jesus taught, they were rejecting our loving Creator as well as the way to heaven. The many spiritual miracles of healing that Jesus performed with her loving spiritual life force in him was proof of his true and correct understanding of who our loving Creator really was. So they had no excuse to not change allegiance to the one loving spiritual creator, but they still hung on to their two-headed God, Yahweh. He tried his best to bring them out of the duality into the singularity, and they murdered him. But he used that to demonstrate to the disciples the absolute spiritual truth that he and Buddha both knew. You live on after death in your spiritual body, or Buddha would say your consciousness travels on. Your consciousness or mind is not your body of flesh. Buddha would teach that. Jesus teaches your spiritual mind travels on, and spiritual form, your body of flesh is not who you are. So it doesn't travel on. So they both taught that. That's why I love them so much. They're so close in their teachings. Loving spiritual life force sent it to you. John 16:5-15, Jesus said, "But now I go away to our loving spiritual creator in the heavenly spiritual world, but none of you ask me, where are you going? And because I tell you this, your hearts are filled with sorrow. Nevertheless, I am telling you the truth. It is to your advantage that I go away in spirit to heaven. For if I do not go in spirit to heaven, I cannot send the loving spiritual life force into you. But if I am in spirit, I can send this helper of our loving creator to you. And when it has come, it will shine the light of truth and love on all things, exposing all spiritual corruptions. It will guide you into all truth, for it will not speak on its own authority, but of the loving creators from whom it comes forth. It will help you see what is to come. It will glorify me and take what is mine and declare it to you. All things that our loving creator has are also mine to have." He's a spiritual child of the loving creator, as we all should be. Author, Jesus says he has to be fully in his spiritual body only to be able to send the loving spiritual life force of our loving spiritual creator into the disciples. So it is to their advantage that his body of flesh is killed, so he can be fully in his spiritual body after rising in spirit from his dead body of flesh. Once filled with the loving spiritual life force, they will all be guided to continue on with their own spiritual lives. He actually gives it to them personally when he appears briefly in the room with them in his risen spiritual body after his body of flesh was crucified, and he breathes on them, and they receive the loving spiritual life force at that moment. That's in one of the Gospels. He says, "Peace be with you." And he breathes on them and says, "Receive the Holy Spirit." And he breathes on them. So they receive it from him directly that Friday night after he appeared to them in his spiritual body. Well, we'll leave it there. So again, Jesus is constantly reiterating, you've got a spiritual body, but it's only filled with a loving spiritual life force from heaven above. It's a different world, a different dimension, different universe. It's spiritual. The creator and the whole creative life force of that dimension and that world, the entire consciousness of that spiritual being, is only love. Become her spiritual child on earth of only love, non-violence. And when your body of flesh dies, your spiritual body filled with her love that you lived out of now, you've come alive to your spiritual identity, your spiritual being of love and non-violence now on earth, in a violent dualistic world of death and suffering. When you leave your physical body, which never rises again from the earth, you will enter heaven, where all spiritual children of love are welcomed to come to by the loving spiritual creator who placed a spiritual body in our bodies of flesh for some reason that I don't quite understand. But it's here, it's in us, and it's the way we go to the next higher world. It's a spiritual universe, spiritual world of everything in it it's harmless. It's a harmless world. There's no death. There's no suffering. There's no evil. It's light and it's truth. It's the true life. So a false, lying, evil thing can't enter, because that's the opposite of the truth. If the truth is love and life and light, then death, destruction, murder, killing, that's the opposite. And it can't enter. Black can't enter white. So all the satanic children in the world at the moment, in all the armies of the world who are satanic, they are covering themselves in dark filth and death. They cannot enter heaven. They won't be there to hurt anyone. They themselves will be in horrific horror realizing what they did, but it'll be too late. And the screaming that they'll be undergoing and the torture in their minds will be unbearable, but they'll have to endure it for however long it takes. 100, 200 years, 1,000 years. However many people they've killed and murdered. All the suffering that they've caused to those children, men and women. They have to experience it all until they're cleansed. That's the karma rule. That's the law of what measure you give, you'll receive back. Jesus and Buddha both taught you will receive exactly what you give out. Jesus, of course, taught, well, look, you can prevent it happening by stopping, saying sorry and apologize to everyone you've hurt, and apologize to this loving spiritual being who's placed a beautiful spiritual body in you, which you covered in stinking filth. Then you've got to wash yourself clean while you're here, dedicate your life to be a child of love, and then you enter the vineyard of love and heaven, even if it's in the last day of your life or week of your life, even if you've been a satanic warmonger your whole journey. If you genuinely have deep remorse, and you're going to have to feel it here. I mean, you've got to feel it. You've got to feel the weight of your sin here, particularly for the satanic mass murderers in the armies, that they are literally Satan's children, literally. They are really filled with evil. Well, they've got to feel the heaviness of that and the weight of that. If they repent, the remorse for them has to be massive. If they don't feel it, it's not cleansed. They have to feel it and say sorry, and then apologize to this beautiful creator who gave them a beautiful spiritual body to be at one, a beautiful spiritual identity of love. The spiritual being gave one to Netanyahu and Putin and Hamas and all the other mass murderers and satanic children in the world, but they've not only rejected that, they've moved out of it into a false fake identity, a lie, and now they're dark shadow satanic figures, and they've covered themselves in thousands and thousands of deaths. Murder. They're just murderers. So we can only pray for them. That's all we can do. We don't join in with them. We don't support them in any way. I always advise children in Australia, never join the Army, Navy or Air Force. Join the Coast Guard or the local police force, sure. But no military things. No, don't do that. They teach you to kill other children. So there you go. So I'm a pacifist Christian from the original church 2,000 years ago. I wonder if there's anyone else out there. The Quakers, the Amish, the Assyrian Christians are all pacifists, but they still, I think, believe Yahweh. Oh no, the Assyrian Christian chap I know, he said to me, no, we don't believe the Jewish God is the God of Jesus. I said, oh, excellent. You're the only Christians I know that know that. You're the only ones. I even think the Quakers might believe that Yahweh is the two-headed God. Yahweh is the same God as Jews. I haven't spoken to them for a while. I never asked them about that. But the Assyrian Christians certainly acknowledge that the Jewish God Yahweh is, I call it a two-headed God. They just simply say, no, that's not the God of Jesus. Jesus is only love. The God of Jesus is only love. So they're right. They're correct. That's the truth. And that's why the Jewish Christian churches are lying to you when they tell you Yahweh is the God of Jesus. That's a lie. It's slander as well. It's filth. So I'm telling you that because I know Jesus. I'm not saying I'm a saint or anything. I'm just saying I know him. He's love and non-violence, and he always has been. I've always known him like an old friend since we were younger. He's always been a great friend of mine of love and non-violence. And I just feel like he's my brother of love and non-violence. Love your way to heaven or hate your way to hell. The choice is yours. Reap what you sow. May you make it to heaven. Go in that direction.